Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up, book 2 in the Dungeon Runner series. I now have the proper title on the book. Today, by me, Kedar, the Tiger Right, along with Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. We are doing chapter 19 today. Tibs got looks from the guard and the runners as he paced along the waiting field, just outside Stowe's range. He didn't want to know how Fedora's run was going. He wanted to hope her team had managed to run well. Yeah. Teams. Teams run. Went well. Stowe would want to keep him appraised, and Tibs was worried that the dungeon would go easy on Fedora's team because of Tibs' involvement. Still sad he didn't play favorite, but there had been multiple demonstrations already that showed that was true. Motion at the door, 2 people exiting, and Tibs breathed easier. Fedora was being supported until the clerk placed a hand on her, then on the fighter. After that, they walked down the steps, still looking as if they were injured. The 2 placed their armor and weapons on the table, along with a handful of copper. No extra equipment meant they didn't get to keep any, and Tibs had warned her against trying to hide on her person. He'd heard stories, back in the early days, of those who tried it. They were always caught, and killed on magic, not just suspicions. The fighter headed for town, but Fedora noticed Tibs and, after hesitating, headed for him. He wanted to say something to her, but found he didn't know what. He remembered how he felt after that first time, confused, hurt, afraid. About the only thing he could offer was the confidence he'd been there after each run. The only thing he could offer was the confidence he'd be there after each run, no matter how many teammates she lost. It was hard, she said, as he fell into steps with her. Those traps, they were horrible. As well as the archer, I don't know her name, and the way she just melted, she shuddered. I tried to convince the fighter, in the direction of the guy, in the guy's direction, that we should turn around right there. Like he said, we should once we lost someone, but he was determined to make it to the last room. We lost the other 2 in the boulder room. She shuddered again. I used to not mind rats. He nodded. It won't be quick, but it'll get easier. It won't be quick, but it gets easier. He'll figure out how the dungeon works, how he thinks, for lack of a better word, he added. Those who survive their runs will know better than to push needlessly. I wish you could just tell me what we need to do to win. There isn't much I can tell you. The dungeon changes things around. The clues were on the floor tiles when I first went through. He noticed the surprised, then thoughtful look she gave him. She hadn't worked out what the walls were about. No wonder she thought the trap room had been hard. Having to test each tile as they went, he was impressed with her skill. He was impressed with her skill that she hadn't died in the process, or only lost one person there. Do you know when I'll have to go in again? No. Unlike those of us at Upsilon, they'll pick you at random while you're in the field. So if I don't go to the field when I'm told to, I won't have to go back in. When they call you out, did they tell you what the consequences are for not going to the field in the morning? We don't get food or a bed. Shrug. I don't need a bed, and I can get food anywhere. He rounded on her, and she had to stop. No, you don't steal in town. You won't know. She spoke with the confidence of one who didn't understand how this town was different from her city. They will. Gregor Rock is too small to have a street for you to hide in, and it never would have one if you had anything to do with it. Harry isn't going to actively hunt you down, but the moment one of the townsfolk complains to a guard about something going missing, they will be looking for you. It'll just be a cell when you're caught, but you're going to fall behind, and that will end up getting you killed. You steal? You had me steal. That's training, and I had you hand the coins back. You aren't at the point where you can pick a pocket and not get caught. you had, and you told me locks aren't something you've had a lot of practice with. The town is filled with rogue runners. Rogue runners. The town folks know to pay attention. He wanted to offer. He wanted to offer to get. He wanted to give her a few coppers so she could afford more than the slop the food tent had for Omega runners. But he recognized the pride in her eyes. She'd be offended, not grateful. You need to go through the dungeon, get better, bring back the Fallen's equipment so you'll get copper, and you need to survive. It's just not fair. He nodded. The guild wasn't fair. There was nothing he could do. He could add to that. A large group of men and women in rags were and looking weary appeared on the platform. Oh, right, I have done that. So that's something I need to change. I later chapter, Tibs mentioned how they're going to bring the guild will bring more people in, but I've already got it on the page, so I need to alter that. A large group of men and women in rags and looking weary approached the platform as Tibs watched. He'd sensed the shift in essence as he walked by and stopped. He didn't usually bother, but the volume of the shift had taken in the entire platform, which had only happened while the merchants were returning. Still reopened his. Were returning once they had opened this door. He'd expected the new merchant with cargo. Now that the bazaar was over, everyone's gone, but they were convicts, runners, stealth. Fedora had had 4 runs over the last 2 weeks. Tips had been there for 2 of them. He paid a copper to one of the guards for them to send a word to him when she went in. On the last one, her entire team returned, deciding the woman room wasn't worth risking because of how injured they were. And they now knew why it was worth keeping the team alive. They got to keep the coppers. She tried to kick him for not telling her that from the start. Wow. Okay. Oh, okay, that is clunky as bleep. All right, let's see. They got to keep coppers. Tried to kick him for not telling him from the start. This is. I think it's just a. Out of the convicts who had arrived with her, there were very few still alive. One team's worth was Epsilon. Only a few weeks, and already survivors were graduating. How long had it taken his group before that happened? But the death count was much higher. Even if Stowe didn't make the first 4 harder for the Epsilon, they had all become stronger running it, and it had increasing difficulty with them. Now the new runners were contending with a harder dungeon from the start. So it made sense the guild had to bring more of them. Bring in more of them. A man broke from the crowd, pushing through the guard, and before Tibbs wondered why they were letting him flee, a large gray dog jumped on his back, sending him face down in the dirt. Serva stepped out of an alley, patted the dog on its head, then hauled the man up by the collar and shoved him back among the others. Oh boy. Among the others, you know what? And they were herded to the field where they'd get the introduction speech. Tibbs wondered if Harry would be giving it. If these arrival became normal, I couldn't imagine the guard leader going to the field each time. Yeah, it's not. The inn was busy, as usual, and Tibbs looked around. Runners had all occupied table, except for 2 nobles seated there. Youch. Which had I don't know why, but I have a bad habit of capitalizing nobles, even when it's not at the start of the phrase. Of course, his father didn't keep anyone out of his inn. They caused trouble, but he didn't give noble the deference they requested of everyone. They, they few spent time here. Few of them spent time here. One of the group had that nobleman was friend with, one that he claimed was a good noble. She'd returned and had reclaimed the house she'd had before. I hadn't heard of her doing anything wrong. She was a noble, so I figured she was just better than most hiding it. Runners were a mix of old and new, but they all gone through the dungeon a few times. The worn and sturdy and functional clothing they wore. People are not clothing. They wore. Some from the cash in the trap room, others from the merchant, who sold old ones for cheap, and he expected other runners had given some. Tibs had given Fedora an old set of clothing he no longer wore. They were short on her. She was a head and a half taller than he was, but still better than what she'd arrived in. He saw her at a table with 6 other runners, 3 of which had been with her when they exited the dungeon that last time. But it was the fighter who caught his attention. He was looking at Tibs with awe on his face. Tibs headed for them instead of his table to find out what that was about. "You're Lightfingers," the boy, which he didn't look that much older than Tibs, exclaimed, and Tibs groaned. "Guys, that's Lightfinger. That's Lightfingers." Fedora eyed Teams and seemed amused. "My name is Tibs," he introduced himself, wondering if she was responsible for spreading his nickname among them. "And you have annoyed its use." Well, she knew how annoyed at its use he was. How annoying he considered it. She knew how annoying he considered it, and he didn't know her so well as to know if this was the thing. This was the thing, a thing she'd do. "He's the one who opened up the second floor, the fighter said, bouncing on his seat in his stomach. "He used to be like us." "Still am." Okay, so probably not Fedora, since he hadn't told her that part. We're all looking at him now. She had a suspicious look on her. With a suspicious look, a suspicious expression. He'd have to explain his reasons, although their reaction should be enough for her to figure out. "Did you really discover the room?" An older girl asked. She had the look of an archer, well-defined arm and piercing gaze. "Don't know," he replied, and made it still severe. "We aren't allowed to talk. To talk about the dungeon once we're outside," he eyed each of them. "So I have no idea if someone else knew about it before I did." "I heard it was you found it," the fighter said, ignoring or likely missing his implied warning. "And that you killed the 4 boss by yourself." "No, I didn't," fixed each of them with a look. "It was my entire team. That's how the dungeon works." Someone was spreading stories of Tibs being some bard song hero. No wonder they were watching him like they were. "What do you want?" a lanky boy near Jackal's age demanded, now looking at Tibs with suspicion. He was a rogue, Tibs decided. Tibs considered them. They were all Omegas, their essence stronger, but still without a tint. He decided to find out how far the rogue's suspicion went. He smiled. "I just want to see how you were all doing," the rogue snorted. He looked at Fedora. "I'm glad to see you found yourself dependable people." "You know him?" the fighter asked, amazed. She glared at him. She glared at Tibs. We've met. "And what does that meeting involve?" Rogue asked, smirking as he looked Tibs up and down. "He's even old enough for that?" "That's not what I meant," Fedora replied, looking disgusted. "He's been giving me help with locks and pockets." The rogue smiled, turned nasty. "Right, pockets. And what have you been playing with in this pockets?" "You're training fat," the fighter exclaimed. "Why didn't you say Lightfingers was training you?" You are on my team the next time I have to go in, so stick close to me. You can't pick who's on your team, a young man in a gray robe said. You go in with whoever they tell you to. Actually, Tibs said before he stopped himself. It was too late now. They were watching him attentively. They only assign the teams because they figure you have it worked out and can do it yourself. Building your team is part of what this period is about. You're on my team, Fed, the fighter exclaimed. Maybe you can let her decide whose team she's on, the archer said, then smiled at Fedora. I can tell you in private what the advantage of being on my teams are. Fedora blushed, and Tibs kept from chuckling, like someone was angling for Fedora to be their special someone. You can both be on my team, the fighter said, completely missing the annoyed look the archer gave him. Were all fighter dense? Tibs wondered. He didn't seem to be attentive, so maybe it was only fighters who were men that missed the obvious? No, Carl didn't miss much. So it was Jekyll and this guy thing. It was a Jekyll and this guy thing. The rogue didn't miss the log, though, and rested his elbows on the table, leaning forward and smiled at Tibs. If I get to pick your pocket for a while, will you give me special training? No. Tibs leveled his gaze on the lanky man and didn't move until he looked away. Let him try to intimidate Tibs. He had to learn to resist that from tougher people before he came here. This guy wasn't straight in any way. How have you been faring in the dungeon? Tibs asked the fighter. It's fun, he blurted out, and Tibs raised an eyebrow. If he found what Stowe did fun, then Tibs didn't. I mean, we survived. So now the look was bashful. Just what did the story say about Tibs that he thought he found the runs fun? It's harder, the sorcerer said. The dungeon had to grow as we survived more of our runs, Tibs replied. The man shook his head. It's not that. It's harder than before. He closed his mouth as cursive. Brought tankards for everyone at the table. Before anyone could act, Tibs placed 2 coppers on the tray, and the server patted his back before leaving. Trying to buy our loyalty, the rogue asked, pushing the tankard away. Celebrating your survival, Tibs replied. Enough runners don't get to enjoy that. You should. The fighter took the rogue's tankard and drank half of it in a solo. I'm all for celebrating. He looked at the sorcerer and tried to place him. You were here before the dungeon was attacked? I didn't one run, it was. Closed his mouth again. I wish we could talk about it. Sip this tankard would make learning how to survive it easier. And what has he told you about surviving the dungeon, Fedora? Rogue asked, smirking it. Or are you not talented enough in that to get him to? Gasped and held his side. Have yourself lucky I don't have a knife yet, the archer said, and stop pushing what you do on other people. Onto, yeah, you know what? Let's make her a little more literal. Onto other people. You want to use your body to get special treatment? You fucking go and do it. The rogue glared at her, but remained silent. Then he looked at Tibs. All amusement gone. All amusement gone. Fine. What do I have to do to survive that thing? I didn't grow up taking what I wanted just to end up dying in there. Don't you mean who? The fighter asked before drinking and covering his smirk. He was tempted to send the rogue to dawn. And all that man had done yet was talk. Talking didn't warrant done. You trained. You already survived your runs, so your chances of surviving the next ones are higher. But you have to train and find a team you trust. The snort at the table gave a good indication of how likely that was for the rogue. A look crossed the rogue's eyes and was gone. It had the sense of why he was acting the way he was, and he was glad he hadn't suggested Dawn. Acting like an ass out of fear was not worthy of the horror that was Dawn. You will lose people you know, he said. Friends you make, but it's less likely to happen with a good team. Don't push people away out of fear of losing them. All that's going to do is cause you to die too. Swallow his emotions, his own fears and worries and memories. This was for them. We survived. Each of us has our reason to do it, out of spite for those who sent us here, out of determination, out of a desire for power. He smiled at Jekyll, or even because we're not quite smart enough to know better. But it's what we do. Survive what the dungeon sends at us. We grow stronger, and in turn, he does too. We continue to get stronger. It'll get easier once you get your element, but don't think it ever ends. They looked at him, taking in what he said. Oh, you're wrong, The girl who spoke was thin, too much so. Like the others, her clothing looked to be from the dungeon, but she didn't look at ease in them. We're going to die in there. That's all we're good for. The stuff they tell it, stuff, the stuff they tell, the stuff they tell about surviving a dungeon making you stronger, it's a lie. You're lying to us, Jagger. You work for them. You just want us to go in there so we'll feed that thing. Tara, the fighter said. Fought it, made it to the second. How the fuck do you know? She demanded. You think one of us gets to be called something like Lightfinger? That we get to have guards look at us like we're not shit to be avoided? If he'd been in there, he wouldn't be there. He wouldn't be here telling us what to do. He'd be dead. We survived, the dungeon said softly. We all did. And you know how I survived? I was too slow. Liam told us the best way to go through that room was to run, and I didn't move in time with them. I saw what it did to them. I barely pulled Carson's body out before the dungeon took him too. She hid her face, sobbing, we're all going to die. Tibs tried to find something encouraging to say. If she thought he worked for the guild, anything he said would just be another lie to her. The fighter placed a hand on her back and she tried to shrug it off. Look, Tibs said, after the accusation, you needed to offer some. If you're afraid you aren't strong enough to survive the dungeon, me and my team can help you train. We sit out here. We sit over there, right at the table, and Jacko, who was seated with Commodore, noticed and gave an enthusiastic wave as the other looked in their direction. Tara glared at him. If you don't trust me, or if we don't have the specific set of skills that'll help you, ask one of the other teams. We have all been where you are, and you really think one of them will help people like us? The rogue demanded. With one exception, every team will at least listen to you, and I doubt any of them will just turn you away. We've learned to help, and it isn't because you're Omegas that we won't help you too. Is that one exception a noble team? Sorcerer asked. I have trouble envisioning any of them helping us. They aren't runners, he replied. They're nobles. And no, they aren't going to help. They're nobles. Ah, if this wasn't dialogue, I would remove that. Runners will help. Pass the word. Make sure everyone listened to any Omega coming to them. They needed more runners to survive if they were here, if only to ensure noble teams didn't outnumber them. I don't trust you, Pharaoh whispered. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to find people you can trust. But if you need help, we'll be there if you ask. He turned and stopped. I hope I get to see you all again after your runs. He headed for his table. Making friends? Jekyll asked. More friends? Don't think I haven't noticed how you and that little lady spend time together. You ever look at her? You even took her to meet Tian. You haven't asked your special girl to pick my pocket yet. He rolled his eyes and motioned to Rosa. She isn't my special girl, just another rogue I'm helping. And they're having a hard time with the rules. So I offered to help train them, I've offered to help them train, So I've offered to help them train if they need it. Is it wise? Commodore asked. Will the guild not look unkindly on you if they find out you're poaching on their territory? I don't know what poaching means, Tibs replied, but then grinned. But if what I'm doing gets the guild to treat me like another runner again, then I can't wait for someone to ask for my help. Jekyll smiled. Then you're about to get your wish. Tibs turned, and instead of Fedora or Tara, it was the lanky rogue who was approaching. I tried to think of anyone who liked guys that would agree to train him. He wasn't looking forward to constantly turning down the offered and snide comments about how else they could train. And this concludes chapter 19 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next one is going to be, subscribe, hit the bell. I run out of stuff. I keep forgetting. I don't have cue cards for these. If you want to support me, the link is in my to my Patreon is in the notes. You can read more of my stories there. You can read the rest of this story for free, as well as book one on Royal Road. The link is also in the notes. And if you want to watch me do these live, stumble my way through all of this, you can do so on Twitch and also write my novels on. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.